creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to the channel RP with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ. And for those who don't know, we go live Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. My time, which is Eastern Standard Time, and we simulcast over at Fancy Grounds College, way down in the boiler room, and also on YouTube and Twitch as well. You can participate in all of those formats. So thank you very much for being here. We usually take a subject on this channel. We deep dive for about an hour, unscripted, just like talking around the gaming table before the game starts. That's what we do. And this week's subject, which is going to be so far away from next week's subject, this week's subject, we're talking about the Medusa. And not specifically, you'll get what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about the Medusa and the elements that create the Medusa in your game, and why it is that I think it's an unsung hero of creatures that you can place into your tabletop RPG game, even if Medusas do not exist in your world. So, what do I mean by this? Well, today's Monster Monday, and of course, the Medusa fits perfectly into that. And Dead Man brings up Gorgons from Greek mythos. Yes, and the Gorgon sisters as well. Yes, but for me, what I love about the Medusa, or what the Medusa represents in the game, is far more emotion than we give it credit for. So, what do I mean by that? We don't often think of the Medusa as being like an undead lich or lick or whatever, power hungry, trying to dominate the world. Are there ones in any person's game, and can you do that? Of course, but you don't often associate the Medusa with that. You don't often associate the Medusa with power hungry schemes. The Medusa seems to have an extreme emotional engine, as it were, a motivator, whether it's pain, lust, love, revenge, anger. There's this deep-seated emotional context to the creature itself that you can really draw on, that I find gives the Medusa a far more compelling story than you would any other creatures. And the great thing about that, and this is included with, say, comic books and comic book movies, when you have a comic book villain that's really compelling, is that you can, at the exact same time, despise the actions that they're performing and still empathize with why they're doing it in the first place. And the Medusa, for me, represents that great gaming creation, right? It's the beautiful woman that's been cursed to be this ugly thing. It's the gods that have reached their hands down and unfairly punished this individual for, loving a great prince or something, or what have you. It's that kind of element. So the Medusa also has a number of other attributes that I feel really can enhance our tabletop games. And of course, most notable one of those, as we all know, is that if you look into the face of the Medusa and a Medusa looks at you, you'll turn to stone. Why is that compelling at all? Well, for me, it represents the epitome of a puzzle monster. Sometimes if you haven't heard that term before, like a puzzle monster, puzzle monsters are like, much like vampires, much like the Netflix movies Bird Box and the Quiet Place movies, the Alien franchise movies. I would even go so far as to add in the Predator aliens as well. Some of these creatures where they have abilities that, if you were able to piece together some knowledge to look at some of the evidence of the things that are around them, and if you are smart enough, if you're smart enough, yep, um, you can circumvent whatever their ability is. Robo-Magon even says, gotta have that mirror shield. Yep, exactly. Or trick the creature into looking at its own reflection, or wearing the blindfold and having to navigate around by touch or something. It's the sure, you could try and pick up a great battle axe and fight this creature head on, but that's not necessarily the smartest move. And puzzle monsters to me really represent that. Um, in a strange way, some of these monsters even have a weakness that kind of goes hand in hand with their great ability. And if you're able to exploit that weakness, it's not a matter of whether you can hit the hardest. It's a matter of if you're smarter or more savvy than the creature. It's the let's fight the vampire until in the basement until daylight comes, and then smash all the windows open and watch shrivel from the sunlight. It's using the holy water or a holy symbol to repel the vampire away from you, or running into a place that has been consecrated by holy power to keep an evil demon back. It's those kind of things. And while a lot of games, specifically Dungeons and Dragons, but a lot of games have stat blocks, not often are the puzzle pieces added to the creatures, and a lot of times it's just about difficulty wording things and trying to balance out the danger versus the exploit. But I love monsters that have that kind of concept in them. Yeah. So Robo puts in the NVIDIA Medusa tech demo in the Medusa demo. Kind of cool. Deadman says the Greek story contained the Aegis shield, or Aegis shield, a shield you could see through from the back that was reflective on the front. I didn't realize that was a trait of it. I thought it was like it had like a, I don't know. I just classically I just imagined this shield with a face on the front, and it had like Medusa's face. So maybe that's kind of what it was about. But strangely enough, having a shield that you can see through, but on the front of it is reflective, really makes you think like, well, why would anyone? It's a exploitive device that has no other purpose to exist in the world except to defeat the Medusa, right? Which means that it's not the kind of thing that you're going to stumble across unless someone specifically goes out of their way to create it, or the heroes or adventurers have created it before you got there, and you find this thing and you're like, why? When I look on it, you describe it to your players like, well, where the arm straps are, it's like plexiglass, but when you look on the other side, it's like a mirror. You can see your face. And you're like, why? What's the point of having this? And then again, you have that thing. Now, the other context I love about the Medusa is the origin. Okay, and whether you go classically, the gods reach down and curse this individual. Where do they come from? What is their origins? And a lot of times, their origin is not, or doesn't need to be, one of biological, Darwinism or something like that. It could be through experimentation. It could be through a curse. It could be through a corrupted magical fount of energy. It could be delving into magics in a deep wood or swamp or something that man and woman was not meant to know. You can come up with so many other origins, and if those origins are ones with an intelligence behind it, then you have a built-in creature with an emotional imperative beyond the outward power grabbing thing. You have these special powers that require the players to think cleverly and to be smart about their actions. And you have a built-in, let's say, you have a built-in cheat as a game master or dungeon master to say, well, if they open up a can of whoop ass on my Medusa, there's some other entity above this monster or creature or individual that may take an interest in the PCs going forward, right? Whether the Medusa is an agent of a greater power or the lost love or something of that nature. Robo's like, would mirrored sunglasses be the ultimate weapon against a Medusa? Maybe they need to be polarized? Yeah, the polarization, yes, because you can't look at the, even through a filter, you can't look at the Medusa technically in the face, but mirrored shades, sure. um, and then, of course, you have the idea of how smart is the Medusa itself? Is the Medusa, does the Medusa have, is it only 2 steps above animal intelligence and is just wild and crazy with rage? Or is it extremely smart and, I don't know, runs an assassin's guild inside of a major city or something with a hooded cloak and everyone's afraid of quote unquote meeting the Medusa's eyes or something? I mean, does the Medusa use and give to its agents its own poison from its poisonous snake-like hair or something? Like, is it that intelligent, or does it have other skills? We've seen in various formats the Medusa being an archer and having weapons and being skilled in other things. What was the Medusa before it became the Medusa? Was it a debutante, a princess? Is the Medusa, does the Medusa may not even be female? Maybe the Medusa was an exiled prince, or someone who, maybe a commoner that was not very, not very handsome, and goes to an old hag to try to find something that will make his beauty even greater. And maybe the Medusa is the Medusan or whatever. I'm not sure what you would call a male Medusa. I'm sure they exist though, and maybe having not looked at his own reflection, thinks he's the most gorgeous person in the world. Everyone else is just like, yeah, you're pretty hideous. And yeah, Omen's like, a sexy Medusa who knows how to take advantage of her beauty would be extremely dangerous, of course. And ignoring the whole like alignment system, because most of us, it's not even a secondary, it's like a footnote. What purpose does the Medusa have, right? Far beyond power grabbing, is the Medusa trying to find the most beautiful person in the world, not necessarily a mate, but to create living statues to have in her, artistic, her artist conclave. Um, uh, Julius Gracime says, "Why do they have wings?" I've I've never, I don't remember ever seeing a Medusa with wings. Not that they don't exist. I don't remember seeing that at all. Yep, who's the fairest of them all? Yeah, you have that the whole jealousy. The the character who is classically like, so, or stereotypically the bard who's like very handsome or beautiful or something, or it doesn't matter. Maybe the PCs or something are very vain, and the Medusa takes an interest in them. Hey, Plur. Plur's like, me, of course. Yet, you know, far beyond gaining power and taking over the world, maybe the Medusa wants to kidnap the people with the greatest voice, the most beauty. Maybe the Medusa takes an interest in protecting those who are within this culture seen as being unattractive, and gathering these individuals to its side, and being like its own patron of sorts, both in the traditional sense of patron or warlock like. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, the harpy. Yep. The harpy is very much related to the Medusa, which is another thing. It doesn't necessarily need to be the Medusa. Okay, it's about it's about creating context for a monster that you might want to include, that when you're stuck with ideas, you're like, you know what? The dragon that wants to take over the countryside, yawn. The lich, okay. Demons want to take over, fine, but I want something different. I want something new. And so picking and pulling at for me, the Medusa represents a number of those things put together, right? We don't often have adversaries whose only purpose is to create the greatest work of art that, of course, sacrifices people's lives. We don't often have an adversary that wants to, I don't know, marry someone rich or famous or beautiful that lives in this distant countryside and will do anything they can to obtain this individual. Maybe what the Medusa wants can never be, it's a desire that can never be satiated, much like the classic vampire that lives forever, and they're always basically going after their lost love, who eventually is killed, or they kill it, or the person dies through old age, and again they are consumed with finding someone that looks exactly like their lost love yet again, over and over. Robo says gathering statues for her gallery of glamour. Of course. And, as side notes, who's to say that these statues aren't sold to the highest bidders, or that that there are agents and agencies that exist in the world, kings, queens, nobles, or what have you, and they understand the Medusa lives out there in the swamps or something, and maybe they make deals with the Medusa, or maybe they understand the Medusa's motivation and are manipulating the normal humanoids are manipulating her, into doing a thing, going after their own enemies, and using and abusing the Medusa's, in essence, her 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 harmed, broken personality to go after a particular individual. I mean, imagine a duke wants to rise in power and makes sure that word is spread about the duke's enemy, and there is a viceroy in this other world who's known to be very vain, and maybe that viceroy really would fit in the Medusa's gallery of glamour, in the Medusa, and a word is put in the Medusa's ear, and the Medusa's like, you can't tell me what to do, but that viceroy really would fit, maybe the Medusa is being manipulated into doing this and doesn't want to turn people to stone, wants to remove the curse, which is a completely other motivation for a monster who doesn't want to be this thing. And again, all these story ideas, while as I'm describing them are about the Medusa, can really be used for so many other things. Imagine the human that doesn't want to be a demon or a devil any longer, and is walking the earth, causing all kinds of harm and havoc, but wants to have this, has gone to hell, and has somehow ripped its way back into society and wants to be normal and human again. But of course, no one would believe that they want to return home to their loved ones, right? You're a devil. You've been cast out to hell. That's where you belong. Robo's like, isn't alliteration fun? Only fun for those that don't have to listen to me make mistakes. But thank you very much for that, though. But the other thing about Medusas are specifically is that we can really, again, you know me, I love to reskin, reshape, reuse, repurpose some abilities. Why does a Medusa have to turn something into stone, marble? Why not other, if you want to stick with the stone, why not other materials? Why not, salt? Both of you guys get in there. Why not salt? Why not jade or diamond or rose quartz or tiger's eye? Imagine a, not one Medusa, but a legacy of them, a gathering of them. Maybe this is a curse that's placed upon any who somehow go into some kind of dark arts or knowledge they're not supposed to understand. and they are transformed, and you can tell the difference between them, maybe by the snakes they have. Others have black snakes, yet more have green snakes with iridescent scales, and their body represents that too. And yet there are snakes with dryish brown, like desert wise. And instead of turning their enemies uh, into granite, they turn them into sandstone because they live in the desert, you know. And instead of like a pale greenish skin with green snakes, maybe they have a very dark ebony skin, from living in the desert, and their scales are sandy and khaki colored or something. And maybe the poison even has different effects, from paralytics to something that, I don't know, causes an allergic reaction or what have you. Maybe instead of a paralytic where your eyes are still open and you can see, maybe it just puts you to sleep, or maybe it just causes harm, causes your heart to stop, or whatever. You could play with so many other things, and then you can go even further, by completely stepping away from the snakes at all to go to something else. But I'll tell you where I might go with that in a minute. Let me get into the chat and such. Um, Deadman says it could be like Trace in the Infinite from Warhammer 40k, a Necron overlord, as he has a massive collection of battles from history created with people and aliens in stasis, and sometimes with close proximity creatures, vehicles, and weapons. Yeah, why wouldn't this creature um, create like a museum of sorts to commemorate or remember specific times? You could even, okay, there is flesh to stone, stone to flesh, right? You can use a spell to come out of the petrification. What if it's used to save lives? Someone with a terminal illness or a wound that or a king that is on his deathbed beseeches the Medusa to turn them to stone to then find a cure, whether it's within minutes, days, hours, weeks, months, or maybe it's a form of immortality that at some point in the future, a wizard's coven or whatever will reverse their stone, turning them back into flesh again. Uh, Julia says Medusa has sometimes appeared as representing notions of scientific determinism and nihilism, so kind of Greek alchemy. I could I could see that, the Medusa being the living embodiment of that. Maybe the Medusa is like is hag like in its portrayal, or if you kill it, you're able to use its body and its the things inside of it, representing, like, what is it, the alchemist stone? Maybe the Medusa is the living form of the alchemist stone to turn like lead to gold or something. That'd be awesome. So, what's the plural for Medusa? Medusae, Medusas? I don't know. I'm Yeah, the Philosopher's Stone. Yeah, I mean, maybe the Medusa's heart is the Philosopher's Stone itself. Ooh. Deadman says the plural is Medusae, a long A at the end. I did not know that. Oh, I did not know that. Caius, hey, what's up, Caius? Caius of Glantry says gangsters use pigs to destroy corpses and evidence. In a world with clone, basically raise dead, speak with the dead, maybe gangsters prefer to use Medusas to eliminate their opponents. Ooh. And you could carry them around, you could put them into storage. Maybe there's a way to even interrogate those that are turned to stone. Um, Off the top of my head, I can't think of a gaming mechanic that allows you to speak to one that's in turned to stone, but maybe there's an ability to do that. Like Kai's thought the same where I went, right? Can you communicate with the mind of a being that is turned to stone? I don't know. Does it stop telepathy? Is a stone victim dead? See, that's the thing, right? Are they dead in the gaming sense, like their spirit goes off to some other alignment-centered world. I'm presuming that they are in some form of stasis, maybe. Um, Robo says there's only one Gorgon sister named Medusa, so why is there a plural? Mm, I think it's just pop culture. I do remember there being other Gorgon sisters. Maybe they have other names, which could represent other bloodlines, or like Julius mentioned, like, are there other, not alchemical lines, I suppose? Ah, Omen, thank you. Okay, let's see if I can butcher this. Um, Uriel was one. Euryale. Yeah. Ctheno, Ctheno, and Uriel. Yeah. So maybe. Okay. So the fact that I don't remember that, although I did remember other sisters, maybe the other two are the jealous ones of Medusa, who happens to be the one that everyone thinks that's how they operate. I mean, here we have a whole family drama involved in it as well, um, and they each could have their own emotional baggage. You know, a Medusa that's proud of what they are, another one that wants to remove the curse and get more. You know, another one. Robo says Medusa means queen, which could be, that could be a it could be a metaphor, thinking of themselves as a queen. It could be in reality that the Medusa name comes upon this curse or accursed queen. You know, Omen's like, imagine naming your daughters that. It was a different time and era, but given enough popularity, I could see someone doing it again. Uh, so, but here we have, no offense, but here we have like a mid-level monster for Dungeons and Dragons, and we go, it's a Medusa, it does a thing. There's not really anything there, and for me, I beg to differ. Yeah, and right, Robo, like, yeah, different language, which means technically you could rename a Medusa for the culture and language of your world, not giving away what it is, right? And based on people's descriptions, mind you, many people may not even understand that the Medusa has snake-like hair if it's covered its head, but may describe its body, and that body in many different forms seems to relate to I believe they're called the Yuan Ti, where they're from the waist down, they are snake-like. So who's to say that they aren't either related through blood, or the PCs assume it's one creature because, you know, they've read the monster manual, and they don't know that it's another creature because, yeah, Nagas are another one with the body of a snake and just the head of a human. So, I mean, human, it's not just human fallibility, but human um, context. Maybe these people call everything that has scales Nagas. Oh, what are lizardmen? No, they're Nagas. You know, who's to say that it isn't the case? So sure, that's a great way to reskin and to surprise your players as well. Instead of just going, oh, it's more goblins and more ogres, whatever. Um, the people they come across may not use the same terminology. If you have different languages, they're going to call them different things as well. Uh, Deadman says Medusa could also mean a free-swimming sexual form of co-illenerate, such as a jellyfish, typically having an umbrella-shaped body, yep, with stinging tentacles around the edge. In some species, Medusae are a phase in the life cycle that alternates with a polypioid phase. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Dead Man. I didn't think of it, but actually one of the thumbnails is that's exactly what I did. I pulled a jellyfish, like a really stark image, like a dark background with it illuminated. And who's to say that the Medusa is it doesn't need to be a gendered humanoid-ish related creature. It could just be it could be as similar, it could have more relationships to plants, single-celled organisms, a phase in the development of something, It could be related to Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth. It could be related to oozes and things of that nature far more than it could be have any single relationship to a bipedal creature. And that would be pretty interesting to have them floating around. And yeah, so Medusa are like tadpoles, maybe. Yeah, hell yeah. Maybe that is the interstitial, like, um, before they move on to another stage in their life. So the player characters may have the ability to avoid the Medusa um, stage, because given enough time, maybe they will mate or transform or shed their skin or die and become something else. And it doesn't need to be follow the biological patterns of our world at all. Um, you could very easily just pick a number of monsters in your world from their CR levels, and you go, okay, well, CR2, it would probably be this, and then when a certain set of circumstances happen, whether it's by season or chemicals or breeding, then they become this other thing. And then, I mean, who's to say that a gray ooze or like a black pudding or something doesn't become this other thing at a certain stage, and then the Medusae species doesn't then move on to some other form or power or what have you. I don't know. What goes beyond that, I don't know. Maybe it could be a size change. Maybe there are some other there's other extraplanar creatures that you could remove the extraplanarness from them, or maybe this is a creature that exists in this form in another plane of existence as well. So yeah, but again, guys, like, just finding those little nuggets of information, and then pulling on them, and just like pulling on them, like, man, there's something else here, but I'm not seeing it, and having that happen. I especially like the idea of the Medusa not being out, not being there to grab power, but there for other purposes. Whether they are a warlock patron, they are the head of some kind of organization, they are an artist, trying to create perfection. They are the curator in a vast artistic uh, enclave, gathering together the greatest artists that the countryside has ever known, from dance and music to sculpting. Maybe it's possible that this Medusa is someone that can teach certain types of magic, or open up the PCs and NPCs to other ways of thinking. And so it may be necessary to, it's like there's a dangerous person, and we all know this person is dangerous, but we can't just kill them because the community needs them. And of course, you do have your PCs that are like, oh, Medusa, let's go kill it. You're going to have, the, the, the open up a can of whoop ass, which is a possibility. But again, we brought up the fact that the Medusa has sisters and things like that. Yeah, it's very much possible for that. Baby Skyless, is that I thought those were the pieces of I'm thinking of tapeworms. I'm sorry. Maybe that's the wrong thing. Um, and also reskinning and reshaping, reusing, repurposing the Medusa for different regions. So again, snakes develop in woodland areas, deserts, swamps, things like that. Uh, oh, okay. All right, Robo. I was mistaken. I thought it was wrong, but I was mistaken. Although a lot of like medical and biological terminology is taken from Latin, so in many ways they sometimes they can be one and the same. Um, for example, there is the idea of medicine and the rod with the snake wrapped around it, and then there's the single snake and the double snake. And if you want to repurpose where that came from, the single snake came from being infected with these parasites, and the double snake was Hermes. Maybe the Medusa has something to do with that. Maybe the Medusa really is a caregiver and can teach the greatest healing arts that man could never achieve. But at the same time, the Medusa is um, also desires to have a cure for his or her or its condition, and so the PCs may be trying to go out there to find a cure, whereas the idiot local villagers are like, we're going to be a mob with torches and pitchforks, we're going to go kill it, and the PCs are like, stop, listen, we're going to get a cure, just relax. That's also a possibility as well, to use it in that sense of um of evil thing looks bad, come to find out it's really good. you know and there could even be if there's more than one of them, maybe one is good and unfortunately is put in a position of having to hand over the exploit to kill his or her own brother or sister. Um, there's also you guys go deep diving into Greek mythology. That's all right. There's also the idea of, remember, it talked about the exploit and what the creature can do. We don't have to limit ourselves to look at creature in stone, right? Whether you're considering having a monster have some other kind of abilities, the idea would be that it's like a glass cannon effect, right? Where if you stand in the way of this creature's primary ability, you're probably going to die or suffer enough harm that is equivalent of death, like being turned to stone, maybe being paralyzed or put to sleep forever. Maybe it's transformed into some form of, like, maybe it transforms you into a small animal that this being keeps in its little small zoo or something like that. Whatever the case may be, um, you know, and in order to get around that, to exploit its weakness, maybe there's something else. Whether instead of like a reflection, maybe you have to put it to sleep with a special concoction of herbs or a type of incense and smoke, or maybe you have to poison it, or maybe there's a song or a lullaby that just distracts it so much from its youth that it remembers and will just start to sway back and forth, listening to an old grandmother sing this lullaby or something. I mean, it could be any number of things. Maybe it's bringing in front of it its most hated enemy, and it could be I don't know, a rival. When they were preteens, these two hated each other, and one became cursed, the other one became um, a baroness of a vast nation or something like that, and maybe just kidnapping the baroness and bringing it, in front of the Medusa is enough to get it to pause long enough for the players to get around behind and cut off its head or something like that. Um, Robo's like Greek mythology, where everything had sex with everything else, and they all made weird hybrid creatures. They sure did, and they sure did like coming down to Earth, taking the shape of various, shall we say, sexually endowed creatures and things, and creating hybrid monsters. So why would Polaroid's like, imagine Jerry Springer in ancient Greece. There would be no shortage of episodes, I tell you that much. Listen, Jerry, I don't know who the daddy is of my baby, but I swear to you, it's either that Minotaur or that ogre, and I'm thinking maybe the demon, but we might have to come back, Jerry. Oh man, PCs have to like break up the fights that happen while the whole crowd is like, Jerry, Jerry. Jerry would have to be a bard though. Not necessarily the most handsome, but can really gather those weirdos in in the one spot. Uh, I just know my baby has a shark head. Um, you the okay. I know I'm squirreling here, but the animated Harley Quinn show is hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious. Yeah. Omen's like, I prefer orc women, but centaurs are worth a try. Omen getting kicked a little bit too hard a couple times there. But um, yeah, do the baby suckle from the human or the horse nipples? Oh boy, this. Yeah, I'm gonna have to turn off the monetization on this one. Um, no. But seriously though, why not have fun with that? I mean, I, I'm not exactly sure why the Medusa has a snake-like. Um, what stone turning things to stone and snakes have to do with each other, other than the fact that snakes are scary and humans don't like snakes, so why not combine the two for mythology? But my little centaur. But who's to say that we can't play with that? Um, for example, if you want to talk about the lower regions of something changing, maybe it's a matter of uh, like, okay, this is I'm going towards a weird place here, so follow me on this. Um, Maybe like the Lamia that was brought up before, maybe its lower regions are related to the region in which it lives. So, and it still does a thing that causes a thing. So, for example, instead of a centaur, maybe it does have a horse's lower regions, but instead of turning someone to stone, it turns them into a tree. Or it could have a crab-like uh, lower waist. It has a humanoid upper body, and then instead of snakes, it has tentacles for hair. I suppose you could do tentacles for the lower body. And instead of turning someone to stone, it turns them into coral or something like that. Maybe something aquatic. Maybe it turns them into a pearlescence, a humanoid, but it looks like they're made out of pearl. What's something else? Maybe ice, although they might melt if they're in the frozen north. They might melt if they are any place other than the frozen, frigid landscape, Arctic location. So, but yeah. Pillar-ist, there are spider ones. You could mash them both together. Spider ones. Why not what's the classic drow or drow, dark elf, turned into a drider, and then the Medusa is the higher level version of that. So you the lower portions could be a spider um coming off of its head. You could just have like regular like silvery or white hair or something. Maybe instead of hands it has claws that are poisonous, or its nails have poison instead. And maybe instead of turning you to stone, okay, follow me on this. Maybe instead of turning you into stone, your body becomes wrapped up in spider silk, which is the same thing, right? You're trapped. You can't get out. You're encased, and instead of keeping you stone forever, maybe over a period of time, little small um, baby eggs will grow inside of your stomach region to only explode and eat your human body to become spiders later on. And you have 3 weeks to get them out of there, or grab their encased, mummified body before they turn into, giant, tiny spiders, rupture out of their stomach to become, larger spiders or something like that. Yeah. Robo says Zeus turned Daphne into a tree, so you could play with that as well. Dante, what's going on? Could turn them just into a gem, add it to a horde like a dragon. Yeah, we mentioned that about um, moving away from random stone to like marble, rose quartz, tiger's eye, amethyst, jade, maybe some of these very valuable stones. I could imagine a dwarven culture that has mined its mountain and there are no more valuable stones, but they made a deal with a Medusa, and they capture innocents to turn them into stones so that the dwarven lord can still keep up this facade of having a mountain that has the most valuable gemstones in the world, you know, and maybe there's a hint of magic inside of the gemstones, literally carving, chiseling the heart out of its victims as the bits and pieces of their bodies are different types of valuable, semi-precious and precious gems or something. I mean, there's a lot of story elements you could put into it, and especially if that dwarven lord with making the deal with the Medusa has gotten in too deep, and someone is able to transform those gemstones back into the flesh that it was, which would be pretty nasty. Or the dwarven lord has made this deal. The local kingdom, of course, they got to be human or humanoid or something, has a deal with the dwarven lord. That's where they're able to fund the materials and money for their army. Finds out about it, has to keep a secret. Finds out there's a faction that wants to reveal the secret, sends assassins to kill those people who are trying to reveal the secret, and the PCs are all pulled into this great plot to keep this undercover. And then Medusa has everybody wrapped around his or her little finger. Robo says onyx was created when Cupid cut the fingernails of Venus. Seriously? They always have a story about something being something, don't they? Um, Maybe there is the Medusa, by turning large, vast numbers of these individuals into these valuable gemstones, will bring about a specific condition, like a ritual, or you must transform 1001 individuals, and they can't just be random. They must be potential lovers or something, and you must transform 1001 of them to eventually become your normal self. Yeah. Omen is like, zoinks. If it wasn't for you meddling kids, I'd have gotten away with it. It could be a mystery van kind of adventure where the PCs are going after, yeah, Shaggy, Velma, and Fred. Gotta help Daphne. Yeah. Daphne's a tree. Oh man, it's so silly. Anyway, yeah, you could, I suppose, if you wanted to transpose this into a near modern setting, like I could imagine, uh, if someone is into Call of Cthulhu, that any period of time from Victorian age on up, the PCs could be investigators, proctors, some kind of people like that, and they are trying to discover this person who is a Medusa that's been around for ages and ages, and maybe the Medusa is just tired of doing what it is, much like the original curse. Um, Maybe the Medusa has gone through the 12 steps of recovery, right? There's anger and frustration and guilt, and or not recovery, of pain, the different steps of blaming others, blaming themselves, depression, hero complex. All of these things, maybe the Medusa has gone through these different stages, and maybe those stages have affected the community at large, right? So you could have one community that wants to hunt and kill the Medusa because the Medusa ravaged their population. You could very well have another community that almost respects. Uh, hey, Rickard, yeah, last 15 minute people, yeah, the steps of grief. I didn't mean steps of recovery, but the different stages of grief, and writ large, right? For a Medusa, I could imagine that the Medusa is feeling guilt over having stoned its loved ones, and then starts to have anger at the people going after it, and then starts to try to make amends to the people it's harmed in its own way. And the human population doesn't understand this, so they're acting out in ways that don't necessarily coincide with what the desires of the Medusa wants. Um, Deadman says Cupid and Venus are the Roman names for Eros and Aphrodite. I could imagine, if you will, so many of our and this kind of deals with Future Friday, but so many of our astrological bodies are named after Greek and Roman god and goddesses and demigods and things. Maybe the Medusa is extra, not planar, but planetary, coming from a place like that. Like, maybe the planet Venus in our own system is not only scientifically the planet Venus with a molten uh, surface because of the greenhouse effect, but maybe it's also the home of the goddess Venus as well. And so, and then extrapolating out a world based on like astrology, an intergalactic community based on astrology as opposed to astronomy. Yeah, Rickard, whenever we hit our 15-minute mark, as Rickard is saying, is that's where we usually spark our greatest, best and greatest. It's almost like getting down or getting ready our character sheets, we're getting our dice out, and someone's like, "Man, I don't have an idea for a good player character," and then they come up with something. So yeah, I thought we would talk about the Medusa this week, and how you guys know that I am the type of person that tries to find the complicated, the creative in the most simple of things, and so I thought I would do something like that. Owen says, bizarrely, the Iron Hand Space Marines come from the planet Medusa, and their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, is sometimes called the Gorgon. That said, it's really strange because he's male. Well, we don't have to. A lot of the classic mythological monsters are female, but you don't necessarily need to make them female, right, at all. Even though we understand that in the past they were, there's no reason, like Deadman even brought up the fact that it doesn't even have to have a gender. It could be very jellyfish-like, so, or it could be androgynous. It's neither male nor female, it just is. That's also a possibility. So we don't have to limit ourselves to that. Although, if you want to embrace the gender-specific nature of the Medusa, maybe the male version of the same thing is something else entirely, right? Maybe that's where you get your Yuan Ts from in your world. Like the females are the Medusa and the males are the Yuan T, and they are maybe immune to the vision, looking the Medusa in the eye. Maybe they're immune to it, or maybe that's the mating danger, right? There are lots of creatures that all the guys try to mate with the female, even though the female will kill you. Maybe that's a thing. Omen's like, yeah, it's like John Wick being called Baba Yaga, with the latter being an old witch from Russia, right? It's not. It's about pulling out the core essential value of the thing, not necessarily the physical embodiment of the thing, right? Baba Yaga is the unknown. It is the mysterious. It is the thing that haunts you, no matter when and where you are, right? And the Medusa's core essential value may be a creature of great beauty and great horror as well, great pain and vast vengeance. And looking into its eye means that you yourself will never be yourself again. And if that's the core essential value of it, you could overlay that on damn near anything. You know, look into its eye and you will never be yourself again could mean anything, right? Robo says the Gorgon was a male villain in the old Birthright AD&D setting. I didn't know that. I remember Birthright, but I don't remember that. So yeah, of course. And how cool would it be? I mean, listen, if you put a male Medusa in your world and never ever refer to it as a Medusa, you just describe its actions, how you describe how people refer to it. You change its color, maybe you change its shape or something like that. Giving little hints that it lives in a castle surrounded by these strange and strangely realistically carved statues or something. Maybe the PCs guess at it, maybe they don't, maybe you surprise them. It's a great way to add new life into that as well. Especially if, again, you change what it is that it has. Maybe instead of snake-like hair, there are tendrils that come out of its arms, out of like pustulent sores or something. Or maybe it opens up its mouth, and inside of its mouth are these nasty tentacles that come out, and just being scratched by those tentacles, it poisons you. It doesn't have to be hair, and it doesn't even have to have a snake-like underbody, right? Just because images or our pop culture thinks of it that way, just here's this guy that just walks around, with a mask on its face. It's the hood. It wears like a domino mask or something, and invites people to the ball. Rickard says, flipping the Medusa on her head, the unbreakable city, the Medusa serving the city as an eternal advisor. All armies of the city stand vigil as statues outside on the giant fields outside the city. I love that. I love that idea. We did. I don't know if you were here earlier, but we did bring that up where maybe the Medusa is turning people to stone for a beneficial purpose, immortality, saving lives. And yes, imagine a Medusa being in league with a wizard's tower, and the people, they have the ability to turn, like you said, the unbreakable city. The army stands out, ever vigilant, only to be transformed back into into their flesh self to defend the city, which would be a very strange and devoted legion of knights and paladins, don't you think? To give themselves up forever, to only become their humanoid self after, I don't know, 1,001 years of service, or whatever the case may be, to then fight a vast army, and literally you're standing out on a battlefield, or maybe the stone is animated itself. Just because you're turned to stone doesn't mean you can't move. So maybe life is then brought back into the stone, and that's where stone golems come from, or earth elementals come from, or reskinned, or something like that. Julia says, quote, every drop of dark blood that fell from the severed head to the ground produced a brood of serpents. Is this a thing? Could be in your world. Cut off the head of the Medusa, and the blood drops to the ground, and creates, each drop of blood itself creates a snake that may grow itself to become a Medusa, or becomes a basilisk. Each drop of blood becomes a basilisk. Ooh, that'd be kind of cool too. So the answer to that question is both yes and no. No in your world, or yes in your world if you want it. I like that. Scott Post is snake not nasty, not nasty enough looking to petrified. Try the anglerfish. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Scott Post is snake not nasty enough looking. Basically, try the anglerfish. There's some pretty nasty animals out there that look like horrible, like they look like horror creatures. Yeah, do a couple of wiki searches or Google searches, and say, yep, you know what? Instead of the anglerfish, my anglerfish is like a Medusa. It just turns them into some, I don't know, seaweed or something, and eats them. Robo says grayscale from Game of Thrones, or the Song of Ice and Fire. That, yes. Strangely enough, that really works. That the grayscale, instead of being turned into stone instantly, maybe it takes place over a number of weeks or even months. And if you are exposed, everyone knows that that you were exposed to the Medusa, either by accident on the road, or maybe you went to visit the Medusa to gain one of those alchemical concoctions the Medusa has been producing, or maybe to save a loved one that was transformed, and you were exposed, but you averted your eyes just enough, but not enough, and now you have grayscale, and you have to find a cure before a week and a day has ended, or something like that. That would be really cool. That's a great way to add tension by literally extending the danger rather than making it instant, Rick says all new enemy armies that come to conquer just get added into more statues. Ooh. So you're saying, like, every time there's a new battle, the old enemies are turned to stone, and there's like this vast array of like statues of armies of different from different nations and different cultures, spreading out like an ever widening circle of statues. That would be sweet. And maybe the newest statues look very, very, very realistic. The older ones have been eroded away, beaten down, fallen in the mud. And the king or whoever, nobles or something that live in this vast city, this protected city, are like, yeah, you too will be added to it. And of course, the stone army becomes its own. It both becomes cover, but it's also a detriment because you could never walk an army through the other stone army. You have to avoid it, and so then you slow down. And if you slow down and you're that much panicked, you can not only get sniped, but yeah, you're a good victim for the Medusa as the Medusa comes out on the battlefield, adding to even more. Um, Robo says you could line the roads to your city with petrified corpses of your enemies, like Vlad the Impaler. Hell yeah, hell yeah! With looks of surprise or screams on their face as they transform. Nobody says that the transformation has to be neat or instant. It could be very painful, much like the grayscale. And as the human body goes through its ravages of pain, you see them scraping at their skin, their lungs full of like pain and stuff. And just each one is just one more statue. And you see the statues lining the road for miles, and the PCs looking at each other like, yeah, no. Deadman says, depending on the story, the blood of Medusa either creates snakes or scorpions. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, the blood itself creates the thing. Okay, we've got to the hour mark, so let's tie a bunch of the stuff together. So maybe the blood, maybe a familiar that you can gain in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, like a snake familiar, a scorpion familiar, um, a ranger that gets a pet or something. Maybe, just maybe, these creatures came from the blood of a Medusa in the first place, and there is a blood, literally blood relationship from one to the other. Maybe even giant scorpions. The only reason they're even, yeah, inverse unicorn blood. Yeah, maybe that's where these things have come from, and so the, for example, the wizard who has or the druid or whatever, maybe someone makes a wizard, and I'm like, I'm gonna make a desert wizard, and I have a scorpion, and then your scorpion familiar runs off. It's a narrative, and the PC is like, my scorpion familiar ran off, and then all of a sudden it climbs up the hand of the Medusa, and the Medusa's looking at the scorpion and treating it nice, almost like a long lost pet or a family member or something like that. And then maybe the Medusa sees the wizard and feels like a familial relationship. Like, oh, I thought you were here to kill me. I didn't realize that we had a relationship. I'm not going to hunt after you. I mean, we're one and the same, right? And that may be a thing. Yeah, Deadman talks about Vlad the Impaler. Yeah, Robo says like a zombie infection. You're infectious like the stone gaze until you fully turn to stone. Ooh, oh, so it's not even so it's like a zombie infection. The minute you're infected, about to turn to stone, your gaze turns others to stone, in which case they get infected and they start running around. So maybe that's why, like, instead of a leprosy colony, there are people with blindfolds on, or sealed helmets on, or wearing masks, or their eyes are pulled out or something to prevent the spread, but the PCs don't know it. And when they see these individuals left on the streets as everyone averts their gaze, maybe the PCs think the population is being unkind to these people who are sick, but really, if you look them in the eye, they see the glow and the deepness of their eyes, and all of a sudden their feet begin, get attached to the ground, and they look at their skin, and their skin starts to change, and they realize they're infected. And then, of course, their regular party members like, don't look at me. I love it. I love this a lot. Damn, we pulled out all the information for like World Building Wednesday and all this other kind of crap, but anyway, we have enough fuel for the rest of the week. But again, you guys know what I'm talking about. Deep diving into taking a very simple, pretty basic, if not legendary creature for Dungeons and Dragons, the Medusa, and doesn't matter what game you're playing, but take that and then transform it. And there's a lot of story ideas in there. So, guys, thank you very much for joining me. Um, for those who don't know or who have been away for quite a bit of time, I'm DBJ. I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. So check us out on Drive Through RPG. We have new releases coming up. I write for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Captain Gothnog, Alex, he's another writer, as well as Rob the Swamper. We make up Critical Hit Publishing. There is a new release called The Highway of Blood over on the Miskatonic Repository if you're interested in Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. So if you're into that as well. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate you guys spending your time. Your time is extremely valuable. I hope when you leave, you're able to leave with a little bit of change. Everyone have a great one. I'll see you later. See you tomorrow. Bye.